Imagine the sound of a Japanese summer, the relentless buzzing of cicadas, the heat shimmering off the asphalt. It is supposed to be peaceful. It is supposed to be safe. But then, the cicadas stop, the birds go silent. And in that heavy, suffocating silence, you hear a sound that does not belong to nature. It sounds like a man's voice, deep, guttural. But when you turn to look, you don't see a man. You see a woman. She is wearing a long white dress. She is wearing a wide-brimmed hat, and she is standing behind a hedge that is 2 meters high. But here is the problem. You can see her head. You can see her neck. You can see her shoulders. If the hedge is 2 meters high, and her upper body is clearly visible above it, that means she is not human. She is over 8 feet tall. If you hear that sound, do not look for the source. If you see that white hat, do not stare. Because in the folklore of Japan, she has a name, Hachishakusama, the 8 feet tall woman. And unlike other ghosts that just scare you, Hachishakusama likes to take things. Specifically, she likes to take you. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are locking the doors, sealing the windows, and diving into the most terrifying survival story from the archives of the Japanese internet. To understand the true horror of this entity, we have to go back to the original account that surfaced on the Japanese forum 2chan in 2008. It wasn't written like a ghost story. It was written like a desperate diary entry, a plea for help. The story follows a young high school student. Let's call him Hiro. Like many Japanese children, Hiro loved visiting his grandparents in the countryside during the summer break. It was a village frozen in time, small, quiet, and surrounded by endless rice fields and dense forests, a place where cell phone service was spotty and ancient traditions were still alive. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The air was thick with humidity. Hiro was resting in the backyard of his grandparents' house, enjoying the lazy atmosphere. He lay on the grass, staring at the clouds, feeling the grass tickle his arms. It was the definition of tranquility. Until he heard it. Hiro sat up. He looked around. The sound was strange. It wasn't mechanical, but it didn't sound entirely human either. It was a deep masculine voice, rhythmically repeating that single syllable. He looked towards the tall hedge that bordered the property. The hedge was old and dense, standing nearly 8 feet high itself. And there, drifting along the top of the hedge, was a white straw hat. Hiro's first thought was logical. He thought, oh, someone is walking on stilts. Or maybe a very tall man is wearing a woman's hat as a joke. He watched the hat move. It stopped at a gap in the hedge. Through the leaves, he could see a face, or what should have been a face. The features were blurred, indistinct, like a smudge on a photograph. But the eyes were sharp, and they were looking directly at him. Then the figure moved on, disappearing behind the trees. The sound faded away. Hiro didn't feel fear yet. He felt confusion. He went back inside the house, grabbed a cold drink, and found his grandparents in the kitchen. They were drinking tea, laughing about something on TV. The scene was warm and normal. Hiro casually asked, "Hey, Grandma, are there any really tall people in this village?" His grandmother paused, her teacup halfway to her mouth. "Tall people? No, not really. Why do you ask?" Hiro shrugged. "I just saw a strange woman in the backyard. She was wearing a white dress and a hat. She was taller than the hedge." The room went silent. The air temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The grandmother's face lost all color. She was trembling. "Hiro," his grandfather said, his voice unusually serious. "Describe her. Exactly. Where did you see her? How tall was she? What did she do?" Hiro repeated the details. The white dress, the hat, the sound. Before he could finish, his grandfather rushed to the phone in the hallway. He dialed a number, his fingers shaking. The sliding door slammed shut. The grandmother grabbed Hiro's shoulders, her grip painful. "You must listen to me," she whispered. "That was Hachishakusama, and she has taken a liking to you." This is where the story shifts from curiosity to survival. Hachishakusama isn't a ghost that haunts a house. She is a predator that hunts a specific prey. And once she marks you, you have hours, maybe less, before she comes to claim you. The grandfather returned. He had called the local temple. The monk couldn't come immediately, but he gave instructions. They had to prepare for a siege. This wasn't a superstition anymore. This was a tactical defense against a supernatural threat. They took Hiro to a room on the second floor, a room with only one window. The grandfather brought out 4 small bowls. He filled them with salt, pure white salt, and placed one in each corner of the room. Next came the newspaper. They didn't just close the curtains. They taped layers of newspaper over the window, sealing every crack, every inch of glass, until not a single ray of light could enter or exit. Finally, a small wooden box containing a statue of Buddha was placed in the center of the room. "Hiro," his grandfather said, "listen to me very carefully. You must stay in this room until 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. Do not leave. Do not let anyone in. Not me, not your grandmother, not your parents." Hiro tried to protest. He was scared. He didn't want to be alone. "You have to be strong," his grandfather commanded. "We will be downstairs keeping watch, but remember, Hachishakusama is clever. She will try to trick you. Do not trust your ears. Do not open that door." The door slid shut. The lock clicked. Hiro was alone in the dim light of a single lamp. Outside, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the village. The nightmare had officially begun. While Hiro sits in that room, listening to his own heartbeat, let's talk about what is actually hunting him. Why is Hachishakusama so terrifying? It's not just her height, it's her intelligence. According to the lore, she was once sealed away by monks in 4 Jizo statues placed at the cardinal points of the village. For years, the village was safe, but recently one of the statues was broken. Some say by construction work, others say by vandalism. The seal was broken, and she was released. She doesn't kill immediately, she stalks. She creates a psychological trap. She usually targets children or young adults because they are easier to trick. And her greatest weapon is not her strength, it is her voice. She can mimic the voice of anyone she wants. Your mother, your father, your best friend. She uses the voices of the people you trust most to get you to lower your defenses, to get you to open the door. Think about that. You are scared. You are alone. And suddenly you hear your mother calling for you from the other side of the door. Every instinct in your body screams at you to open it, to run into her arms. But if you do, you die. It is a test of will, a test of sanity. And for Hiro, that test was about to begin. It was 1 a.m. Hiro was sitting on the tatami mat, hugging his knees. He couldn't sleep. The silence of the house was deafening. Every creak of the wood sounded like a footstep. He kept glancing at the bowls of salt in the corners. They were still white. Then he heard a tapping sound on the window. Hiro froze. The window was on the second floor. There was no balcony. There was no tree nearby. Nothing could reach that high. Nothing, except something that was 8 feet tall. Then he heard a voice from the hallway. It was his grandfather. "Hiro, are you okay in there?" Hiro let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "Grandpa?" "Yes, it's me," the voice said. It sounded kind, concerned. "It's okay now. The danger has passed. You can come out. I have some snacks for you." Hiro stood up. He walked towards the sliding door. He wanted to leave this suffocating room. He reached for the lock. But then something caught his eye. The bowl of salt in the corner nearest the door. Within seconds, the pure white salt had turned pitch black. Hiro recoiled as if burned. He backed away from the door. "Grandpa?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Open the door, Hiro," the voice replied. But the tone had changed. It wasn't kind anymore. It was demanding, impatient. "Why won't you open the door? Open it. Open it." And then the mask slipped. The grandfather's voice dissolved into that mechanical, guttural rhythm. The knocking became pounding. The entire house seemed to shake. Hiro scrambled back to the center of the room, clutching the Buddha statue, praying, closing his eyes tight. Outside the window, the tapping continued. Outside the door, the chanting continued. He was surrounded. There was nowhere to run. He was a prisoner in a box, and the monster was scratching at the lid. He sat there, weeping silently, watching the salt turn black in every corner, counting the seconds until sunrise. At 7 a.m., the noises stopped. A gentle knock came at the door. "Hiro, it's Mom and Grandma." Hiro didn't move. How could he trust them? But then he heard his grandmother reciting the specific mantra the monk had told them. It was really them. He opened the door. His grandmother was crying. His grandfather looked 10 years older, but the nightmare wasn't over. They had to leave. Now. A van was waiting outside. Inside sat the monk and several men from the village, all blood relatives of Hiro. They placed Hiro in the middle seat. "Listen to me," the monk said. "Keep your head down. Close your eyes. Do not look out the window until we are out of the village boundaries. Do you understand?" The van sped down the narrow country roads. The atmosphere was tense. The men were chanting prayers continuously. Hiro kept his head down, squeezing his eyes shut. But curiosity is a curse. As the van turned a corner, Hiro felt a strange compulsion. He opened his eyes just a crack. He looked out the tinted window. There, keeping pace with the van, running alongside them at 60 kilometers per hour, was a woman in a white dress. She wasn't running. She was taking massive, inhuman strides. Her face was pressed against the glass, and she was smiling. Hiro screamed. The monk shouted, "Close your eyes," harder than before. The driver slammed on the accelerator. They sped out of the valley, leaving the boundary of the village behind. The sound faded. The figure vanished. They made it to the airport. Hiro flew back to the city. He was safe. Or so he thought. Years later, his grandfather passed away. Hiro wanted to attend the funeral. He wanted to say goodbye. But his grandmother called him. Her voice was stern. "You cannot come back, Hiro. Not for the funeral. Not ever." "Why?" he asked. "It's been 10 years. "Because," she whispered, "even after 10 years, she is still standing by the gate, waiting for you." This brings us to the terrifying reality of Hachishakusama. Most monsters kill you or they don't. But Hachishakusama? She is patient. She doesn't forget. Once you see her, you carry a mark. You are exiled from the place you call home. So the next time you are in the countryside, and you hear a strange sound when the cicadas stop, do not look for the source. Keep walking. Because if you see an 8-foot tall woman in a white hat, you might never be able to go back home again.